The election race between Trump and Harris is heating up, and we are just days away from the polls. But the question remains, who's going to win? Here's my bold prediction. Donald Trump is not just going to win, he's going to win big. After watching this video, you'll understand why I believe Trump will carry every swing state and even win the popular vote. Yes, you heard me right. This isn't wishful thinking. It's based on cold, hard data and a track record of polling underestimations that have plagued past elections. I know many of you may be skeptical. After all, the left-wing media loves to push the narrative that Trump's time is up. They say his popularity is waning and that Harris has an edge in swing states. But hold on a second. Let's take a deeper look at the numbers. If history has taught us anything, it's that polling, particularly when it comes to Trump, has consistently misrepresented his true level of support. Pollsters overestimated Democratic strength in 2016 and again in 2020. And the kicker? They are making the same mistake in 2024. So, let's break it all down. The first point we need to address is polling bias. This isn't just about error margins. This is about a systematic underestimation of Trump's support. We've seen this happen twice before. In 2016, the polls leading up to the election showed Hillary Clinton winning swing states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. However, on election night, Trump took those states and the Electoral College along with them. In 2020, we saw a similar story. Joe Biden was expected to win by a landslide in certain swing states. Pollsters had Biden ahead by an average of 7.9 points in Michigan, 4.7 in Pennsylvania, and 5.3 in Nevada. But when the actual votes were tallied, the story was very different. The margins were much closer than expected. Biden won Michigan by just 2.8 points, Pennsylvania by 1.2 points, and Nevada by 2.4 points. So what happened? Were the pollsters simply bad at their jobs, or was something else at play? Well, the answer lies somewhere in between. Pollsters tend to oversample urban and suburban voters, many of whom are more likely to support Democrats. Meanwhile, Trump's base, which includes a significant number of rural and working-class voters, either doesn't participate in polling or is underrepresented. This phenomenon, known as the shy Trump voter, continues to skew the data. Let me put this into perspective. In 2016, the average polling bias in favor of the Democratic candidate was 3.1 points in swing states. In 2020, it was 3.6 points. So, if the polls show Harris leading by a couple of points in any key state, we should be suspicious. History tells us that these numbers are inflated, and when adjusted, Trump could actually be ahead. Have a look at the polling data for the 2024 election compared to 2020. We'll focus on some of the most critical swing states and places where the race is often decided by razor-thin margins. First, Michigan. In Michigan, Harris is currently up by 2.7 points. This is a state that has long been seen as a Democratic stronghold, but we need to look at what happened in 2020 to get a clearer picture. The polls showed Biden with a massive 7.9-point lead on Election Day, but when the votes were counted, he only won by 2.8 points, a polling margin of error of 5.1. If we apply that same margin of error to 2024, Trump is actually ahead by 2.4 points. That's right. According to this adjusted analysis, Trump is not just competitive in Michigan. He's leading. Next, we turn to Pennsylvania, another crucial battleground state. Right now, the polls show Harris with a narrow 1.4-point lead. But let's look at the 2020 numbers. Biden had a 4.7-point polling lead going into the election, only to win by a mere 1.2 points. That's a margin of error of 3.5 points. If we apply that same adjustment to 2024, Trump is up by 2.1 points. Pennsylvania is looking solid for Trump, despite what the mainstream media might have you believe. Now, let's examine Nevada. The current polling shows Harris leading by a slim margin of 0.7 points. But again, we need to consider what happened in 2020. Back then, Biden was leading in the polls by 5.3 points, but he only won the state by 2.4 points, a margin of error of 2.9 points. If we adjust for that same error in 2024, Trump is actually ahead by 1.2 points in Nevada. Once again, the media narrative is flipped on its head when we consider historical polling inaccuracies. Georgia already looks favorable for Trump, with him leading by 1 point in the latest polls. In 2020, Biden was ahead in the polls by 1.2 points, but only won the state by a razor-thin margin of 0.2 points. That leaves a margin of error of 1 point. When we adjust for that margin of error in 2024, Trump's lead grows to 2 points. Georgia is another state where Trump is poised for victory. In North Carolina, Trump is barely ahead in the polls, leading by 0.1 points. But let's look at 2020. Biden was polling ahead by 1.8 points, but Trump ended up winning by 1.3 points, a polling margin of error of 3.1 points. When we apply that margin to today's numbers, Trump is up by 3.4 points. North Carolina is another state that is solidly in Trump's camp. Arizona is another critical swing state. Right now, Trump has a slim lead of 0.5 points. But in 2020, Biden led by 2.6 points in the polls and barely squeaked out a victory by 0.3 points, a margin of error of 2.3 points. If we apply that same margin of error to 2024, Trump's lead expands to 2.8 points. Arizona is looking like another likely win for Trump. Finally, let's talk about Wisconsin. Harris currently leads by 1.8 points in the polls, but back in 2020, Biden had a massive lead of 8.4 points and ended up winning the state by just 0.6 points. That's a massive margin of error of 7.8 points. When we adjust for that in 2024, Trump is ahead by 6 points. Wisconsin could be one of the decisive states that lock in Trump's path to victory. Now that we've walked through the swing states, let's discuss the national popular vote. Harris is currently leading in national polls by 2.9 points. But again, Biden had a commanding 8.4-point lead in the national polls, yet he won the popular vote by only 4.5 points, a margin of error of 3.9 points. If we adjust for that in 2024, Trump is actually ahead by 1 point in the national popular vote. This would be a monumental shift, as it's widely assumed that Democrats have a natural advantage in the popular vote due to strongholds like California and New York. However, with Trump's growing appeal among key voter demographics, we could see a surprising outcome in 2024. So, why are the polls wrong again in 2024? The answer lies in several factors that the mainstream media either overlooks or downplays. First, let's talk about the shy Trump voter phenomenon. This refers to a significant number of Trump supporters who either refuse to participate in polls or deliberately mislead pollsters due to the political climate. In today's hyperpolarized environment, many Trump voters are cautious about expressing their support openly, but they still show up in force on Election Day. This phenomenon was particularly pronounced in 2020, and it hasn't gone away. If anything, it may have grown stronger. The more Trump is attacked in the media, the more his base doubles down in their support, even if they remain quiet about it publicly. Another reason the polls are likely wrong is due to demographic shifts in key swing states. Trump has managed to broaden his appeal, particularly among working-class voters and minorities. In 2020, Trump made significant gains among Black and Hispanic voters, and these trends are likely to continue into 2024. The media often ignores this, but the numbers don't lie. Trump's coalition is growing, while the Democrats are losing ground among some of their key constituencies. This shift is particularly important in swing states with large minority populations, like Florida, Arizona, and Nevada. The media's narrative that Trump is unpopular with minority voters is becoming increasingly outdated. In fact, his policies on issues like economic growth, law and order, and border security have resonated with many of these communities. While the Democratic Party continues to take minority votes for granted, Trump is actively working to win them over, and it's working. Another key demographic that has shifted toward Trump is the working-class vote, particularly in the Rust Belt. States like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin were once Democratic strongholds, but Trump's focus on bringing back manufacturing jobs and opposing trade deals like NAFTA has won him significant support among blue-collar voters. These voters care deeply about issues like job security, trade, and economic sovereignty, issues on which Trump has a clear edge over Harris. The changes in voter coalitions, combined with the shy Trump voter phenomenon, paint a picture of a much stronger Trump candidacy than the polls suggest. And when you factor in the polling biases we discussed earlier, the picture becomes even clearer. Now, let's turn our attention to some states that, while not traditionally considered swing states, could still play a pivotal role in 2024. These states are New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Jersey. In New Hampshire, Trump has consistently performed better than expected. In 2016, Hillary Clinton barely won the state, and in 2020, Biden won by a narrow margin. But the political landscape in New Hampshire has shifted since then, with an increasing number of voters gravitating toward Trump's message on issues like the economy, immigration, and national security. With the right momentum, New Hampshire could flip for Trump in 2024. Virginia is another state that, although it leans blue, could come into play. While Virginia has trended Democratic in recent years, Trump's focus on economic issues and law and order resonates with many suburban and rural voters. If Trump can make inroads in the growing exurbs and rural areas, while continuing to improve his margins with minority voters, he has a shot at being competitive in the state. Then there's New Jersey. Now I know what you're thinking. New Jersey is a deep blue state, but hear me out. While it's highly unlikely that Trump will win New Jersey, he could outperform expectations there. The Garden State has a significant population of working-class voters, particularly in the southern part of the state, who are drawn to Trump's economic message. Every vote counts in the popular vote tally, and a stronger-than-expected showing in deep blue states like New Jersey could further bolster Trump's national numbers, helping him win the popular vote. Now let's talk about Kamala Harris. The Democrats face a significant challenge with her at the top of the ticket. Harris's approval ratings are some of the worst we've seen for a major presidential candidate in recent memory. She's struggling to connect with voters, and she's not gaining traction even within her own party. There are several reasons for this. First, Harris has been widely criticized for her handling of major issues like the economy, foreign policy, and immigration. Her performance as vice president, particularly in managing the border crisis, has left many voters unimpressed. She's also perceived as lacking the charisma and leadership qualities needed to inspire the Democratic base. In a head-to-head matchup with Trump, who is known for his larger-than-life persona and ability to rally his supporters, Harris is at a distinct disadvantage. Furthermore, the Democratic Party is more fractured than it's been in decades. The progressive wing of the party has grown increasingly dissatisfied with the party's establishment leadership, and Harris has failed to unite the various factions. Without the unifying presence of a figure like Obama or even Biden, the Democrats are facing an enthusiasm gap heading into 2024. This is a major problem for Harris. Enthusiasm drives voter turnout, and right now, the energy is clearly on the Republican side. Trump's base is fired up, while many Democrats are lukewarm about Harris. This lack of enthusiasm could be the deciding factor in key swing states, where a small dip in turnout could mean the difference between winning and losing. So, what does all this mean for the 2024 election? Simply put, the numbers are on Trump's side. The mainstream media and pollsters might try to convince you otherwise. Still, when we look at the polling bias from previous elections, the shy Trump voter effect, and Trump's growing appeal among key demographics, it's clear that he's in a strong position to not only win the Electoral College, but also carry the popular vote. The swing states are leaning heavily in Trump's favor when adjusted for historical polling errors. States like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Georgia all show Trump ahead when we account for the polling bias. Even states like New Hampshire and Virginia could come into play, further increasing Trump's electoral count. In short, all signs point to Donald Trump securing a decisive victory in the 2024 election. If the polls are any indication, and when adjusted for their historical inaccuracies, they show Trump not only winning every swing state, but also potentially the popular vote. The mainstream media may not want to admit it, but the data doesn't lie. Trump is on track for a historic win in 2024. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.